Can you lose weight on a high-carb diet? It's commonly stated that in order to lose weight, you need to decrease your carb intake. But where did this idea come from? Does the science support this idea? And what has been my experience with my clients? We're going to talk about all of this, and by the end of the video, you're going to know the best strategy for weight loss for you.
Got a real good feeling, got a real good feeling, like there is lightning deep in my bones.
What's up guys, Ryan here, TreadawayTraining.com, where we help busy professionals get more results in less time through online training. Now, before we begin, if you want more information on body transforming training and nutrition topics, consider subscribing. The first thing I want to talk about is where this idea came from. When we eat a meal, the carbs in that meal get broken down into glucose, which is sugar that's used by our cells for energy. The pancreas detects the increased glucose levels in the bloodstream and releases insulin in response. The insulin then leads the glucose into our liver, muscle, and fat cells. When glucose levels return to normal, insulin levels drop. This process starts all over again the next time we eat. Insulin also has other functions. It stimulates muscle protein synthesis, which is building muscle. It stops fat breakdown, and it stimulates fat storage. Those last two functions are why carbs get a bad reputation. The thinking goes, a high carb diet leads to high insulin levels, which leads to storing more fat and burning less fat, which leads to becoming obese. Low carb diet leads to low insulin levels, which leads to storing less fat and burning more fat, which leads to six-pack abs. This is called the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity. It all sounds very convincing, and you may actually already be ready to quit carbs just based on what I've said so far, but do high carb diets actually lead to being overweight in practice, not just on paper? Unfortunately, or fortunately I guess depending on how you look at it, the science does not support this. In fact, a 2009 study compared 4 reduced calorie diets. In the first diet, 65% of each individual's total calorie intake was from carbs. In the second, 55% was from carbs. In the third, 45%, and in the fourth group, 35%. The study found there were no significant differences in weight loss or waist circumference between any of the 4 groups, suggesting that the calorie intake was the primary factor in their weight loss. This is further supported by a 2014 meta-analysis, which is basically a study that takes other studies and summarizes the results. This meta-analysis looked at 19 studies and found there to be no difference in weight loss between higher carb diets and lower carb diets. While high carb versus low carb versus high fat versus low fat may not be important for weight loss, protein intake is. This 2003 study shows that not only does a higher protein intake lead to slightly better weight loss, but more of the weight that was lost in this study came from body fat. So the science says decrease calorie intake, increase protein intake, and don't worry about carbs versus fats. But we're not done yet. There's one crucial aspect that we haven't talked about yet that may change how you should approach dieting for weight loss, and that is adherence. Low carb versus low fat may not directly impact results, but it certainly matters from the standpoint of which diet are you more likely to stick to. After all, the ability to stick to your diet is the most important factor for actually getting any results. In order to determine what type of diet most people seem to enjoy, I looked at a few of my clients' food logs. As a quick bit of background so that this experiment will make sense, in most situations I give my clients a calorie and a protein target, but leave carbs and fats up to their personal preference. I took the food logs of 7 clients who had an average weight loss of 36 pounds and crunched some numbers to see where they fell on the spectrum of low carb high fat to high carb low fat. Obviously I had a pretty good idea of which way the results would lean since I see my clients' food logs from week to week, but I was actually surprised as to how far they leaned in one direction. On average, my clients eat 42% more calories from carbs than from fats. The client who ate the highest percentage of carbs to fats ate 127% more calories from carbs than from fats. The client who ate the lowest percentage of carbs had 6% more calories from carbs than from fats. In other words, not a single client chose to eat a high-fat, low-carb diet. And I know I only selected 7 clients to run the numbers on out of about 170 to 180 clients that I've trained total. So that is a small sample size, but based on the food logs that I see from week to week, I believe that to be a pretty accurate representation of all of the clients that I've trained. Based on this data from my clients, it seems as though most people prefer a higher carb, lower fat diet. Now that said, I'm not saying that there's no one out there who will have an easier time sticking to a low carb diet. If you prefer a low carb diet, do that. But if you've never tried either, I would recommend trying a higher carb, lower fat diet first. And if you like that, stick with it. If you don't like it, then you can try a moderate carb, moderate fat diet or a low carb, low fat diet. The take home message here is to do whatever it is that helps you to stick to a calorie target and a protein target for the long term. If you don't know how many calories you should be eating in a day, check out the calorie calculator that I have listed below. It will be a good estimate to start from. And if you want more in-depth information on how fat storage and fat breakdown work, I wrote a blog post on the topic that I will also have linked down below. And before we end the video, what I want you to do is to go down into the comments below and let everybody know whether you prefer a low carb diet, a moderate carb diet, or a high carb diet. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. If you want more content just like this, consider subscribing or watch one of the videos that will be up on the screen. You can also check us out on the Treadaway Training Blogcast. We're there every Sunday at 3 p.m. That's treadawaytraining.com/blog. As always, God bless you and your family, and we'll see you tomorrow. There's one crucial aspect that
I've got some reminders for Ryan.
cool.